was it? He didn't tell her nothing. He sat down every night, sir, sharpening the Collins and mumbling to himself. And that was deemed by the court to be domestic violence, a threat, an implicit threat. But back then, the weapon, the high point of violence, was the use of the Collins. Times have changed, you know, sir. Times have changed where if somebody does you something, you don't run home for your big brother who will come and beat the person because he happens to be bigger and got bigger fists. You don't run to pick up what we used to call a Bajan hand grenade, sir, or a big rock and pelt it at somebody. When rocks were thrown, that was a serious offense because of the possibility it might hit somebody else. A fight at school, sir, put you in detention, you might get a suspension. Throwing rocks will land you in expulsion. That was bad. No, sir, when I remember, sir, we were down Baxter Road at night, and two people got in an argument. And the aggressor, after he got a cuff in his face, said, wait right here, I came back. This ain't how nothing to do with me. I happened to be there with some people. At which point I suggested to everybody that they leave the space. I don't know where he went. I don't know what he was coming back with. I don't know what he intended to do. But I was not sticking around to find out. And I encourage everybody else to make their exit as well. Sir, nowadays, when things get out of hand and somebody leaves to come back, you automatically think the worst. You don't think they're going for the brother. You don't think they're going for Collins. When somebody leaves with a threat that they came back to deal with you, sir, our mind goes to one thing. It has gotten out of hand. This, when we say we is we, this is not what we contemplate as being we. In recognition of this, sir, it was deemed necessary that we had to shape our legislation to meet the evolving and apparent circumstances in which we find ourselves. And it was deemed expedient and critical to create a separate offense that addresses serious violent crimes committed in public spaces in circumstances calculated to instill fear in the public or committed with a reckless disregard for public safety. So the intention, sir, here is to create a modern legislative framework that deters brazen public violence, enhances public safety, and provides additional sanctions for offenders whose conduct terrorizes communities and undermines public confidence. Sir, we thought long and hard about the use of the word terrorism in this bill because of what I said, sir, was the traditional definition of terrorism. We even looked to see whether the existing Anti-Terrorism Act, sir, that was passed in 2002, could even be widened or stretched to encompass situations where fear is created in a country that might destabilize it, but without the bottom line being ideological or political change. Sir, the Barbados Anti-Terrorism Act in 2002 was enacted primarily to implement international obligations relating to terrorism and terrorist financing. And that act is directed at terrorism in its traditional sense. As I said, to bring about political, ideological, or similar change. Sir, our recent incidents, and I'm going to get to examples of the incidents shortly, our recent incidents in Barbados of public violence or violence in public spaces, while they generate widespread concern and they strike fear or terror in the hearts of the citizens, do not properly fall within the scope of the current Anti-Terrorism Act. If I use as an example of the things that we contemplate addressing here, everybody remembers the murder that was committed in the crowded food court at Sheraton, where somebody went in the food court and emptied the clip, lighted the place and emptied the clip, sir. And I think there was a delegation or a group of blind persons there for whom, sir, you couldn't even see, they could not even see what was happening, and they could not even know where to run. And I cannot contemplate the range of emotions and fears that they might, if you lose one sense, your other senses are heightened. So in not being able to see, you're hearing the cacophony of gunshots, you're hearing screams, you're hearing people scampering, and you don't know where to run. So they didn't just fear for their life, sir, they were petrified in place because they had no way of even dealing with the situation. And then when you contemplate, sir, the other persons who were there legitimately doing their business, who were able-bodied, for want of a better word, where you hearing a whole set of gunshots, you don't know where it's coming from, you don't know if you're running towards the gunshots or not running towards the gunshots. All you can do is hit the ground and pray that nothing hits you. That assassination in Sheraton Center, sir, was not a one-man retaliation against another man. That was designed. And if it was not designed, then the perpetrator was reckless. Reckless, sir, as to his impact on the persons in the vicinity. That, sir, is an act of terror. It is not political. It is not ideological. It is a brutal act of terror, a violent act conducted in such circumstances, sir, that the public was entitled and expected to feel fear and terror. Sir, let's talk about the shooting in Nelson Street establishment. Somebody rolled up in Nelson Street, sir, and shot up a bar, resulting in the death of 3 innocent patrons. I understand the person they were trying to target was not one of them. But you roll up and shoot up a public bar in a broad daylight in a public area, one of the most frequented areas in the city. Reckless as to who was caught in that crossfire. Everyone on that street felt fear and terror. And it's a case in point that the person you were going to kill was not even one of the persons who was injured. We have it, sir, with people coming off of cruises. As the Honourable Minister for Justice has said. I'm not supposed to hear him, but it's relevant, so I'll hear him there. But people targeting people coming off of cruises, where you're all effectively captive on a boat waiting to disembark. When the shooting starts, you've got nowhere to run. You have to leave through one exit. It's a funnel. If you talk about shooting fish in a barrel, that's what it is, sir. Sir, the daylight shootings across multiple districts involving high-powered firearms. People rolled through Dickens, sir, and discharged shots. Somebody was down Silver Sands. People came through on a motorcycle, sir, and shot at all Silver Sands with a high-powered weapon. I think 40-something cases, spent cases were recovered. Some went through people's houses right there in the middle of the day with children running about the place. Those, sir, are acts of terror. If the current definition of terrorism does not capture them, we have to create a definition that does, because we cannot ignore that they are what they are. Barbadians in these instances, sir, feel justifiably afraid and call out to their government to do something about it. Sir, quite frankly, it is hard to stop a crime before it happens. If 2 men or a man picks up and decides that he's coming after you today, sir, and he ain't discussing about it, you can't stop it. What you can do is create the framework that causes him to pause, or should cause a reasonable thinking person to pause, because you're not getting the slap on your wrist. You will be dealt with to the fullest extent of the law under a piece of legislation designed recognizing the terror you're perpetrating upon the people of Barbados. Sir, I'll be straight with you. The DPP had advised, well, he was of the same mind that the current Anti-Terrorism Act does not adequately cover these incidents. But the DPP is a creature of strict law. And he was of the opinion, and some people are of the opinion, that the current statutes capture it. that everything that is done, all of the offenses that stand as the bottom line, baseline offense for domestic terrorism are actually crimes of themselves. And they can be dealt with under wounding, under assault, under manslaughter, under murder. But sir, that recognizes the actus reus only. The actus reus is what qualifies that crime under the legislation. The mens rea is the mental element. It just says that you knew what you were doing and deals with and renders you liable to a guilty verdict for the mental element, or that you were reckless as to the cause. But sir, what it does not capture is the overall circumstances and the effect on the country or the people at large. So it was our position, sir, that if you shoot a man, that is a heinous and horrible crime. You should be dealt with as harsh as possible under the Firearms Act. But if you go and shoot that man in full glare of children or near to a school or in a fete or a crop over activity like the incident, sir, down Spring Garden a couple of years ago, that is not just simply a simple crime of assault and you get charged with the fact that you wounded the one person. No, you should get something more. Because from the time you picked up and put yourselves in that set of circumstances, from the time you present yourself into the public and you walk into the public place, a public circumstance with the intention of doing somebody harm, thought should occur to you that you will, if caught, you will face the fullest extent possible under the laws of Barbados. And we deem, sir, that although the offenses that stand as the baseline offenses for domestic terrorism are themselves punishable, that was not enough. The terror to the public, or your recklessness or your callousness in dealing with the public and the impact on the country at large, sir, requires that something else come into play. You hold the charge and you hold the conviction on the serious offense, but if you are found to have committed domestic terrorism based on the circumstances in which the serious offense was actually committed, then so you get something else. It must be an aggravating factor. You get tacked on. You get sentenced on the first one, and then what you're found on domestic terrorism runs consecutively, not concurrently. When you finish serving out your first sentence, your penalty under domestic terrorism is now going to start to run. You must feel the consequences, sir, of what you did. Sir, there was a report from CARICOM, the high-level representative for law and criminal justice, Mr. Godfrey Smith, who recommended a broader interpretation of anti-terrorism legislation, and he proposed certain legislative reforms. Right? And he prepared a draft bill for what was called an Indiscriminate Crime Act. Sir, but our position, regardless of the severity of a serious or ordinary criminal offense, the Anti-Terrorism Act was not intended to cover that. So rather than try to bring something under something else that we know it doesn't fit and creates a loophole and we know is going to get struck down on appeal, so it was necessary to create a legislative framework to deal with that, create the offense that we want to create. So a dedicated legislative response is preferable. The proposed legislation, this legislation, sir, focuses on the aggravating public circumstances surrounding serious offenses rather than simply trying to capture them on the rubric of terrorism simpliciter. That's legal language, sir. Let me rephrase that. This legislation focuses on the circumstances surrounding the serious offense. The serious offense must have happened for this to kick in, but it also focuses, sir, on the circumstances around it rather than just simply trying to capture it under what we call terrorism. So we're creating a new offense, sir. Now, if I go to a summary of what the Domestic Terrorism Bill 2026 is about. This bill, sir, creates a new criminal offense of domestic terrorism and provides severe penalties for persons who commit serious criminal offenses in circumstances that threaten, terrorize, or endanger the public. Sir, the main feature is the creation of a new offense. It establishes a standalone offense of domestic terrorism. So a person who commits an act meeting the statutory definition is guilty of an indictable offense. What is the definition of domestic terrorism? That's in clause 2 of the bill, sir. An act constitutes domestic terrorism where it involves a serious criminal offense and it satisfies one of the following conditions. So these are or conditions. It satisfies one of the following conditions. Public fear or reckless disregard. So the offense is committed in a public place with the intention of causing the public or section of the public to fear for their safety or the safety of others. Or the offense is committed recklessly or without regard for public safety. Sir, under law, there's something called intention. And then there's something called the implied intention. You are deemed under law to have intended the natural and probable consequences of your action. So if you go into a public place and you're trying to send a message, I want to show I'm the bad man, or my boss is the bad man, they send me to kill this man. So I am going for him, not in his house. I'm going for him at a football game because he must be killed in front of all them people to send a message as to who's the boss. Then, sir, you commit it intentionally. But, sir, equally, if you do not, by reason of your callousness or your lack of intelligence, if that is not your direct and distinct intention, the law implies it. If I walk onto a football field where they got 1,000 supporters and a game is in progress, and I walk across the field with a machine gun, and I start to loose shots with the intention of killing somebody, then, sir, the law says, although I may not have exercised my mind as far to thinking, I am going to generate fear in everybody. I am so fixed on the one person that I'm reckless or indifferent as to what happens to the rest. The law says the circumstances are such that any reasonable person would have foreseen if you open up fire in a crowded place, that everybody be frightened, everybody be running for their life. So although you say, that was not my intention, I went for that one man, it doesn't matter. If any reasonable person, sir, would see them circumstances and lead to the natural conclusion. And worse yet, if you open fire, sir, on the one person and it causes a stampede, and all the other persons get injured, or other people die in the stampede, then you're responsible for the deaths of them too, although you did not mean it. No, sir. There's another one, sir. We also said, when we look at new legislation or amendments, sir, we don't just limit it to the one thing you're contemplating. So I'll be straight, sir. This was initially informed by the fact of the semi-automatic gun use and the brazen public killings. But so it doesn't make sense to deal with domestic terrorism and not factor other things which have not yet arisen, but which we contemplate can possibly arise. So domestic terrorism also, sir, includes bias-motivated circumstances. So it's committed, domestic terrorism also includes where the offense is committed in a public place and is motivated by bias against race, nationality, ethnic origin, sex, sexual orientation, gender, or religion. Barbados, sir, has historically been black and white. I think the euphemistic proportion is 90% persons of African descent, 90% Caucasian, 10% Caucasian persons. But, sir, we are getting to a point where our racial makeup is expanding. We have a number of Chinese laborers, Chinese persons in Barbados conducting business, a lot of them working on government projects. Sir, and chances are a lot of them are going to stay. We have increasing influences outside of the traditional black and white. So we don't have to wait until somebody does something. We have to, right now in drafting this legislation, we thought, okay, what else can we properly consider that falls naturally to be considered under this? And that, sir, is also racial or hate crimes that are perpetrated in public. Sir, the other one that is included is dangerous firearm activity. This, sir, evoked a lot of discussion in cabinet, sir, because it was not initially included. Initially, we looked at crimes where there was a victim. So our domestic terrorism contemplation was initially, sir, in relation to crimes which involve a victim. Somebody was hurt, a serious criminal activity was committed against an individual, and the individual suffered consequences. That's what was initially done, sir. But the Honourable Member for St. Thomas, I remember, sir, it was late in the day. This was our 6th or 7th stab at this, for want of a better phrase, our 6th or 7th attempt at this piece of legislation over many, many weeks. And we have finally, sir, finally gotten to the point where everybody said, yes, we are comfortable. You remember, sir, that Calypso cricket in the jungle? Litway the wicket, the elephant bowled the ball, not everybody scampering, and the donkey walking back. And then there was a pause, sir, and it said, then Mr. Parrot, the umpire, he said, all you horse and strain. Elephant, that was a no ball. Donkey to bat again. Everybody accepted what had happened. The consequences that flowed from the donkey, the elephant knocking down the wicket, knocking down the donkey, knocking down the wicket keeper, everybody, and the donkey was walking back. And there was a pause, a dramatic pause. And I said, I captured it, sir, there was a dramatic pause. And then the Honourable Member for St. Thomas said, but what if? So, sir, we discussed that, and we went with the what if. So we expanded, sir, to include dangerous firearm activity. So the offense also involves the unlawful importation, possession, carrying, or use of firearms or ammunition of such type, quantity, or manner as to pose a significant threat to public safety. So let's use a simple one. If you bring in a pallet through the port, and that pallet there ends up having multiple high-powered weapons, ammunition, whatnot, you've not actually hurt anybody yet. However, if any logical and reasonable person would say, if those weapons had gotten out of the port, then what would happen? Who were they going to? For what? So in those circumstances, sir, if the police raid your house, not yours, sir, if the police raid somebody else's house and discover a cache of weapons, that's not a one gun or two guns, enough to supply a small army, then you stand to be caught under this, although nobody was yet injured. So I consider, sir, a valid and valuable addition to the bill. The temptation was to put a quantity. A quantity, sir, leaves too many loopholes. If you don't make that quantity, let's say you said 10 guns. If you don't make the 10 firearms, if you make the quantity with 10 small pistols, you stand to be charged under domestic terrorism. You stand for a domestic terrorism charge. If you don't make 10 weapons, but you have 8 AK-47s, well, I dare say, sir, that 8 AK-47s are a lot more dangerous than 10 pistols in terms of the mass destruction and the mass impact they can have. So we had to resist the temptation to drop a number in there and instead leave a court and a jury to decide on the circumstances of it. We're all intelligent people. If it does not strike the jury as sufficient to warrant the charge, then they will bring the person back not guilty. But if the circumstances of it are such that there could be no other reasonable explanation that this was meant to perpetrate some grievous crime or set of criminal activities, then, sir, the person should stand to be charged and convicted under this legislation. Sir, we deal with public place. What does a public place include? We went through, sir, when we initially had a definition of a public place to include a school, university, polyclinic, whatnot. But the thought was, by starting to define those, we then generate people saying that that was the contemplation of. So something else that might be public that does not fall, is not related closely to those, was not in the contemplation of legislation. So we as Bajans all know what a public place is. If you say somebody exposed themselves in a public place, we know what that public place is. We ain't gonna spell it out. So, sir, the public place is any premises, it starts with roads and highways. Right? You can't get more public than a road. You can say the public road. You can't get more public than a road or a public highway. And any premises or location to which members of the public have access or are permitted to have access, whether upon payment or otherwise. So a public place also includes a private place being used for a public event. So let's say, sir, somebody rents a venue for a crop over party, and the public has access to that, whether by payment or otherwise, and you go and you perpetrate your acts of violence in that place, then, sir, you are caught by this. And it is the public nature that actually informed the contemplation of this legislation, because it was the striking fear and terror in the hearts of the public, or it being done in such a way as calculated to, or being reckless as to whether you cause public fear or public panic. So it must be in a public place. And that, sir, is with one exception: the finding of the ammunition and whatnot, or possession of the firearms need not be in a public place, but the circumstances deal more with the quantum than with the place that they were found. So that's the one exception there, sir. What is a serious criminal offense? A serious criminal offense, so we said it must be in relation to a serious criminal offense. A serious criminal offense, sir, is an offense which is punishable by death, or for which a sentence of 5 years or more imprisonment may be imposed by statute. So anything, sir, that could attract a sentence of 5 or more years would fall to be considered as a serious criminal offense that could transition to domestic terrorism based on the circumstances, sir, or from which property or benefits valued at $5,000 or more are derived from its commission. So it's the circumstances, sir, that are at the bottom of all of this. When we try to arrive at the value, I'll be straight, sir, because you know what, sir, I can present this bill vanilla, at which point the public will actually not understand some of the reasons that we put things in here. Or I could try to spell it out in plain language so the public understands how this got here. Sir, it is known, and we know, that persons have accepted funds as low as $5,000 to go and exact revenge on somebody else. And I use exact revenge, sir, in the widest possible sense that everybody knows what I'm talking about. People have been paid, sir, we know that people have been paid $5,000 to go and shoot somebody. $5,000. $5,000. So, sir, if you stand to gain, whether in money or money's worth, in excess of $5,000 for the commission of an act in public, then, sir, this stands to be caught here as a serious criminal offense. So the serious criminal offense, sir, is the starting point. You must have committed a serious criminal offense in order to actually start to attract the charge of domestic terrorism. And that's the baseline for the serious criminal offense. Punishable by death. So that includes murder, treason, for which a sentence of 5 years or more imprisonment may be imposed by statute, or for which property or benefits valued at $5,000 or more derived from its commission. So what are the penalties? For murder-related domestic terrorism, so where the act of domestic terrorism results in the death of a person, the offender may suffer death or be liable to be sentenced to life imprisonment. For other serious offenses, so for domestic terrorism involving any other criminal offense, you can get up to life imprisonment. So everything else, so if it involves murder, then you stand to suffer death, so or life imprisonment. And this is an aggravating factor, sir, effectively for a murder charge. So if the murder was committed in such a way, in the full glare of the public, in circumstances where terror ensued, where you're sending a message, then, sir, this will go towards asking for the death sentence to be imposed upon the person. Sir, consecutive sentences, where any other sentence up to life imprisonment is imposed for domestic terrorism, that sentence must be served consecutively to the sentence imposed for the underlying criminal offense. So if the underlying criminal offense was possession of a firearm, you might get, 10 years for that. If it is served possession of 50 firearms, you might get life. You can stand to get up to life. If you shot up a place, sir, and injured 2 or 3 people, whereas for the wounding or the assault, occasional, actual, whatever it is, sir, for the wounding, you may end up with a sentence of maybe 20 years in total. If they sentence you for another 20 years under domestic terrorism, then your 20 years for domestic terrorism will start to be served after you've spent the 20 years for the underlying offense. So it is intended to compound the sentence. Once you get into the area of domestic terrorism, sir, it is intended that that compound, no running concurrently, no conviction, reprimand, discharge on this, but you're getting something else. No. No, sir, you will feel the full weight of the law. If they let you off on the rest, you can still serve for domestic terrorism. Sir, the key policy effect, sir. This bill does not redefine all serious crimes as terrorism. Instead, it creates the additional offense where serious criminal conduct terrorizes the public, is committed with reckless disregard for public safety, is motivated by certain forms of bias, or involves particularly dangerous firearm activity that threatens the wider community. The prosecution should establish, sir, an intention to instill fear among the members of the public or recklessness as to whether terror or fear would result. And it is limited, sir, to serious violent offenses, including conduct that causes death or serious bodily harm, endangers life, or creates significant risk to public safety, and once again involves firearms, explosives, or similarly dangerous weapons. Sir, if I yes, sir. So firearms, explosives, or similar dangerous weapons. Sir, the principal crime under this legislation, the offense required, the principal crime occurs in a public place such as shopping centers. I'm going to list them. We didn't want to put them in the legislation for a reason, but just to put out there in the minds of Barbadians what we're talking about. So where the principal crime occurs in a public place, including but not limited to, for the avoidance of any doubt, shopping centers, restaurants and bars, bus terminals, parks and beaches, streets and highways, government buildings open to the public, or places of entertainment and mass public activities. Right? Where the members of the public are present or likely to be present and thereby exposed to the danger created by the offender's conduct. And the circumstances are such that the conduct is capable of causing fear for personal safety among bystanders, whether that fear is actually experienced or reasonably foreseeable. So why is this requirement important? It is necessary to distinguish between serious violent crime conducted in relative isolation and the same crime committed openly before members of the public. So, for example, these are some of the things that would likely qualify. A gunman enters a crowded food court and shoots a target. An assailant fires indiscriminately in a bar or a nightclub. And by indiscriminately, I mean not necessarily targeting any particular person, but just goes in a bar and nightclub and opens fire. a person detonates an explosive device in a public gathering, or a targeted killing carried out in a busy bus terminal. So I'm just trying to create the image for persons to understand where this applies as opposed to a normal criminal activity. What would not qualify, likely not qualify? A murder committed in a private residence with no public exposure, then that's simply a murder. A homicide committed in a deserted location where no members of the public are concerned. People find out about it the next day in the newspaper, and while they are scandalized by it, they are not terrorized by the immediate occurrence or conduct of the criminal activity. A fight between individuals in a secluded area that does not expose the public to danger. Sir, I want to thank this. We started this under the last government. That's when we first started to draft it and contemplate it. It was not considered before the government changed, so we came back again. But I want to use the example that was actually put forward by the former Attorney General, my mentor, the former member for St. Joseph, sir, with your permission. Sir, he said, in discussing this matter, the principal offense should be carried out in a public place and within sight of members of the public. As key to the offense is the effect that it has on the public. As always, though, it will be a matter of degree and judgment. A murder in a deserted Farley Hill National Park should not be looked at in the same way as a murder in the same place in the presence of picnickers. We accept, of course, that the horrific and public nature of any crime may also shock more than those who are present. Often the public at large is traumatized by the offense and its brazenness, but that should not be a consideration in this legislation, as all crime has the potential to traumatize members of the public at large, even when they only know of it through the news or social media. In a nutshell, sir, it's all about circumstance. It's all about circumstance. The prosecution will have to prove, sir, that the circumstances exist in a matter the public felt immediately traumatized or endangered by the activity. That it is not just simply the place, it involves the place, the time, the attendance by members of the public, and the circumstances of it are critical. And while we accept, sir, that any brazen act of violence will in some way traumatize the public of Barbados when they become aware of it, this act deals not, sir, with the trauma in retrospect, but it deals with acts which, the commission of which evokes an immediate fear for your own safety or for the safety of others. And, sir, and the circumstances are such that anybody would say this person deserves more than just a penalty for shooting, for stabbing, for blowing up. Sir, I think sir, that it is a very, very short bill. I went into it in great detail because I also want to use this to send a message. I hope, sir, that the press carries this fully. We want to send the message. We have heard the public of Barbados. We have heard them say more must be done to punish these people who have no respect for life or limb. More must be done to send a message that we are saying no more to the persons who care not about the safety of the public, of our children. More must be done, sir, to dissuade and punish those who don't respect public places. More must be done, sir, to those who feel to perpetrate acts of violence in public motivated by race or bias or other things like that, sir. And we also said, although you don't commit an act, a direct act with a victim, if you see fit to import, to possess, to distribute weapons firearms explosives of such quantities that there could be no other reason than to perpetrate significant harm on one or more members of the public, then you stand as well to be considered and to face the hammer under this piece of legislation. So we've heard the public. Your government, spent a lot of time in trying to get this one right, in trying to address the concerns, in trying to have additional penalties, in making sure, sir, that those who perpetrate these acts that I outlined before are not out in 10 or 15 years. That if you do these acts that constitute domestic terrorism, sir, you will spend the vast majority of the rest of your life at Dodds Prison, if you don't suffer death as part of your sentence because of the heinous nature of your crime. Sir, I had to go into this much detail because the message had to be sent and it had to be clear what it was we were dealing with. I guess based on anything that comes after this, sir, I will deal with that in my wrap-up. But for now, sir, I simply beg members to take note of what was said, and I beg that this be read a second time.
Honourable for the city.
Sorry. I support this bill, Mr. Speaker, sir, because it's a public order offense, sir. The truth is, sir, that the Learned Attorney General was correct when he said that the existing piece of legislation, not in these words, but the existing piece of legislation, even the anti-terrorism bill, really is insufficient and does not create this offense of domestic terrorism that we are seeking to bring today. Further, Mr. Speaker, sir, you're well aware that we have in Barbados what we call the Public Order Act. Public Order, I believe, is Cat 168, speaking subject to correction. But the Public Order Act, sir, when it was passed, created an offense of violent disorder, sir. That is what happened at Spring Gardens, sir, and crop over. There, Kadoomat there, sir. In fact, all of the accused men were charged with violent disorder, sir. Although, sir, firearms were used. But of course, it will have been very difficult, sir, to pursue the case because of the evidentiary, sir, challenges in the case, sir. But you know, sir, if the case had gone to court, sir, and if the jury had come back and convicted them, sir, look at the penalty, sir. A person guilty of violent disorder is liable on conviction on indictment and imprisonment for a term of 7 years or to a fine of $50,000 or both, sir. So, a man, sir.
Honourable member, weren't you also charged, sir, for endangering life, sir?
Yes, they were charged for endangering life. They were charged under the, I believe, the Firearms Act. But I'm speaking, sir, to Public Order Act, sir. But I'm speaking, sir, to public order offenses, sir. Strictly, sir. Yeah. And one could have seen that as a public order offense, sir. And indeed, it was a public order offense. So if you go into the public, sir, in a public space or public place, sir, and you are on indictment, sir, for violent disorder, your penalty, sir, maximum penalty, is 7 years or $50,000 or both, sir. Although, sir, you have threatened public safety, you have threatened citizen security, and you have committed acts of lawlessness and recklessness, sir. It is my view, sir, that in cases outside of domestic terrorism, sir, we must have now to go and do a comprehensive, sir, reform, sir, of the Public Order Act and public order offenses, sir. But what you want to say, sir, is that this piece of legislation, sir, now, as we said with the anti-gang legislation, sir, now provides the prosecutor with an additional tool, sir, an additional tool to fight this crime and violence, sir, in this country, sir. Sir, I will say that this, what we're doing today, yes, I classify it as a landmark piece of legislation, sir, as the anti-gang legislation, sir. And it shows government commitment, not only to improve, sir, the criminal justice system and the administration of justice, sir, but indeed, sir, to ensure, sir, that we have pieces of legislation that act not only, sir, to prosecute, sir, simply to prosecute these offenses, sir, but simply, sir, to ensure that there's some very deterrent penalties in the pieces of legislation, sir. And so in this legislation, sir, the penalties, sir, I will submit, sir, will have a deterrent effect, sir. Will have a deterrent effect, sir. And I want to say this, sir, that it shows a government commitment to citizen security, sir. Government commitment to public safety, sir. Government commitment, sir, to persons who go out and to have a good time even with their families, sir. And communities, sir. Before, sir, and I would draw an example, sir, of the Crop Over Festival, sir. Communities would hold street fairs, bring communities together, sir. But of course, what happened at Sheraton, what happened, sir, after the cruise, sir, would of course cause for some concern, sir, and indeed, sir, it would cause the law enforcement agency, sir, to have a second look or a third look, sir, in terms of granting permission, sir, to hold these events, sir, because of what happened before. So I believe, sir, that with this commitment, sir, the fact, sir, that we are seeking now to deter individuals, deter gang members from committing these offenses, sir, these lawless offenses, sir, or reckless offenses, sir, as the Attorney General rightly said, sir, that the elements of this offense, one, recklessness, the intent, sir, and by your conduct, sir, will constitute, sir, the mens rea, and the fact that if you take out a gun or you take out a Collins and run in a public place, sir, and cause, sir, issues, sir, and threaten public safety, sir, threaten persons who are in an open public place, sir, enjoying themselves, sir, then, sir, you shall suffer the consequences, sir. Sir, it is a commitment to the fact, sir, that we are treating gun violence and treating, because the reason I'm saying gun violence, sir, because we know, sir, that what is contemplated, sir, is not only the fact, sir, that you're using firearms, sir, illegal firearms, and we are seeking, sir, not only to get rid of them, sir, we're also seeking that persons who go out there and use these illegal firearms, sir, recklessly, sir, to suffer the consequences, sir. The impact that I have on communities, sir. The impact that I have on the family too, sir. Because, sir, imagine, sir, you go to a public place. You go with your family. You go with individuals, like what happened in Sheraton, sir. And then you are wounded by a man of straw, sir. And you're the only breadwinner of the family, sir. You become a burden to the state, sir. But that person will only be charged, sir, with the serious offense. But now we're bringing out that if you commit that act in the public, you still have now to face another count on the indictment of domestic terrorism, sir. So as you learn the term journalists rightly say, If it don't get you here, sir, there's a likelihood that you will get you here, sir. Because, as I said, it's an additional tool in the prosecutor toolbox, sir, to catch, sir, the accused man on trial, sir. Sir, I want to, as I said, sir, you don't have to be on the wicket batting again. And I'm going to be very brief in my submission, sir, respectfully, sir. Sir, what attracted me to this legislation, sir, and I believe it is consistent with other pieces of legislation involving domestic terrorism, sir. Yes, sir, the judge has a discretion, sir, when it comes to sentencing, sir. But unlike the Public Order Act, sir, where there's a fine, sir, or you get a fine or imprisonment, both, sir. In this piece of legislation, sir, you know what the penalties are, sir. Very strict penalties, sir. Extremely strict penalties, sir. Sir, I want to say to Barbados, sir, that this piece of legislation, sir, is a result, sir, of persons who believe that they could commit acts of retaliation too, sir. That where gang members believe, sir, that they could go to a school fair or go to a busy business place, sir, like Sheraton, go to a cruise, sir, and lay away, sir, having no regard, sir, having no regard for public safety, no regard for citizen security, will believe, sir, that it's proper to go after the target, sir, at the expense, sir, of innocent bystanders, sir, and persons who went out to a cruise, enjoying themselves, and then you have to be faced, sir, with this act of lawlessness, sir, and recklessness, sir, by individuals, sir. Sir, I want to conclude by stating, sir, that I support this bill. I support this bill. Where it come from before, sir, even if it was there too at this stage, sir, I will support this bill too, sir. As a citizen of Barbados, sir, and as a citizen who, sir, is concerned, sir, about the acts, sir, of violence, the acts of violence, sir, and lawlessness and recklessness, sir, that we have in this society, sir. Sir, this bill, no, brings together, sir, a whole set of pieces of legislation, sir, that impact positively on the criminal justice system, sir. You have the Bail Act, sir. You have the Firearms Act, sir. You had the Gun Court Act, sir, with the amendment to the Supreme Court of Judicial Act, sir. We have, sir, the Witness Protection Bill, sir. All of these pieces of legislation, sir, would impact positively, sir, on the criminal justice system, sir. As I said, sir, my submission will be short because I have to bat on the wicket again, sir, shortly. And so I support the Learned Attorney General, sir. I support, sir, the intention, sir, of this government to ensure and to make sure, sir, that citizens, sir, have their security and have their safety, sir. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member St. Michael Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to support this particular piece of legislation. I think it's important for me as a young person to support it because when I think of the youth, I think of the future. And when I also think of who are the main or primary offenders these days, it is persons under the age of 25, sir, Mr. Speaker, sir. It is unfortunate that today we live in a society where persons have to second guess whether or not they are safe by going to work, Mr. Speaker, sir. I remember not too long ago, there was a shooting at, I believe it was Curtin's gas station, Mr. Speaker, sir. Imagine you going to work, making a living, earning for yourself, for your family, to then that day be shot because you were at the wrong place, the wrong time, and now have to suffer a lifetime of illness because the bullet is still lodged in your spine. And as such, you can't walk properly, Mr. Speaker, sir. So there was another instance, I believe it was Silver Hill, where a young boy was shot, 17 years old. He was on a play park, minding his business. He was shot in broad daylight. There were numerous bystanders there, Mr. Speaker, sir. These are instances that we cannot continue to allow to happen as a government in Barbados, Mr. Speaker, sir. So when we speak of punishment, we have to remember the 4 philosophical goals that punishment is to achieve, Mr. Speaker, sir. We have, of course, rehabilitation. We have deterrence, retribution, and incapacitation. You heard the Honourable Member for the City say, this bill is a deterrence because of the punishment that it brings down on persons who are to be classified as terrorists. You saw that punishment if it is you've committed a murder in a public place, Mr. Speaker, sir. It is life imprisonment. It can be death, Mr. Speaker, sir. And if it is not murder, you will have sentences which are not concurrent. So it really brings down, it really displays and it sends the message of the seriousness of these type of offenses. Because citizens, Barbadian citizens, have to feel comfortable in this country. Women have to feel comfortable walking around by themselves. Old people, the elderly, have to feel comfortable. Children have to know if I go outside and I play and I am just being a child, they have to feel comfortable, not fearful that, oh, someone's going to drive by with an AK and shoot up the place and I'm going to lose my life. Parents have to feel comfortable allowing their children to go outside and play with their friends, Mr. Speaker, sir. We have to get back to a society where this is the norm. Where what is not the norm is you hearing fireworks, but the first thing that you do is run and hide because you think it's gunshots. That's the first thing that comes to mind. Mr. Speaker, sir, sometimes I'm in my bed lying down, and I know there are cars that have the exhaust that when you hear it, sometimes it sounds like a gunshot. And you're traumatized because when these things happen in communities, you are traumatized. I spoke to a woman recently who said there was a shooting in her neighborhood, and she has not come outside after 6 p.m. since then. She locks up everything, her windows, everything, and she goes in her bed. She turns off even her lights because she does not want anyone to think she is at home. Mr. Speaker, sir, these are the type of impacts that these public shootings have on persons. But when you speak of deterrence, Mr. Speaker, you have to speak of, you can only deter someone who is of reasonable mind. Because there are some young persons these days and persons in general that are soulless. They have no conscience. They have no morale. And no matter how many bills we bring to this parliament and how many pieces of legislation we pass, we cannot legislate morale. We cannot legislate good conscience. There are times when I get angry, Mr. Speaker, sir, and I may have certain thoughts, but I don't act on those thoughts because there's a voice in my head that says, Tyra, that is not good. Don't do it. That is not according to God. It is not according to the law. Don't do it. You have too much to lose. Don't do it. But there are persons in this society, Mr. Speaker, sir, that do not have that voice. They do not. They don't care. They don't have no respect for authority. They have no respect for God. They don't fear God. They have no respect for life. The loss of life means nothing to them, Mr. Speaker, sir. So until we address that problem, it doesn't matter how many pieces of legislation we bring in this parliament. It doesn't matter how harsh the penalties may be. It could be death. It could be life imprisonment. If you have a man that does not care for himself, for others, or for God, that does nothing to or for him. And that is where we have to get to. We have to address the mental issues of this country, sir. There are lots of persons walking around that have mental issues and ailments that are unaddressed because they don't believe they have a problem. We heard not too long ago there were some tests carried out that said the abuse of marijuana leads to bipolar, it leads to schizophrenia, and it leads to paranoia. And we have a lot of young people who are abusing marijuana and as such are suffering from those ailments and do not know. Then you have the crisis with the mollies and all the other hard drugs that 17-year-olds are under, and the big men on the block doping them up. And when they dope up, they go and they do the shootings, Mr. Speaker, sir, and they don't know because they're not in their right state of mind. They don't care about how this is going to impact a family. They don't think about repercussions. They don't say, well, I'm not going to do this shooting because if I get caught, I might get life imprisonment. They don't have that thinking, that level of thinking, Mr. Speaker, sir. So yes, I support this bill. I do. And yes, I support the fact that it is another tool in the armory to fight against the rise of crime in this country. But we as a society, we need to go a step further. Parents, you need to look at your children because it starts from when they are young. Do not wait until they turn 17 and 18 years old to not want to cry blue murder. You have to get them from when they are young, instill values in them. Take them to Sunday school. They have to know a God. They have to know a God. That is the only way. Mr. Speaker, sir, it starts from primary school level. Children have to get back to knowing what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad. We have to get back to the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That is the only way we will save this country, Mr. Speaker, sir. It is not the numbers of legislation, pieces of legislation we bring to this parliament. It is the person, the human beings that we are dealing with. The morale, that fiber, that thing that makes us human beings. Conscious, good conscience is what makes us good human beings, Mr. Speaker, sir. So once again, I must say I support this bill and I applaud the Honourable Member for Christchurch East for bringing this piece of legislation to the floor of Parliament. But we as a society, Mr. Speaker, sir, we need to go a step further. With those few words, I am obliged.
Honourable Member for St. Thomas.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to lend my support to the domestic terrorism bill before the House today. And I would like to thank the Attorney General for his...
Honourable, your mic is on. Your mic is on.
I'd like to thank the Honourable Attorney General for the manner in which he clearly outlined the provisions of the bill. And sir, I want to add my voice to that line of debate started by the Honourable Attorney General, so as to ensure that we can assuage those suspecting and doubting voices in the public of the real intentions of the government. We live in a society in which we cannot control misinformation and disinformation, but there are members of the public, sir, who can discern fact from fiction and misinformation from information. This bill is a straightforward and compelling bill to protect the people of Barbados from harm, and indeed, sir, one of the more fundamental responsibilities of the government, or any government, is the protection of people. Protection from extreme violence and violence intended to cause shock, or violence that is in complete disregard for the level of fear and apprehension on the part of ordinary citizens as they go about their business, is ultimately the concern of this piece of legislation. And we have to ensure, as a government, to act responsibly, sir, and to ensure that those who terrorize communities, spread fear, or threaten public safety are not allowed to do so rampantly. At the heart of this bill, Mr. Speaker, is a recognition that not all criminal acts are the same. There are people who commit offenses for personal gain. There are people who commit offenses out of the sheer overwhelming burdens of their own necessity. And there are persons, sir, who would commit offenses without any regard to the level of shock or the callousness that is exhibited in their conduct. There's some, sir, who would destabilize this community in order to gain a foothold in the community, whether controlling a block or whether controlling some economic control over the community. Criminal conduct, when it crosses that line, sir, becomes an attack on the public, and I believe that the government has a duty to act in this regard. This legislation does fill an important gap, and the Learning Attorney General is right that one would not have thought that domestic terrorism would have ever had to be brought into legal form by way of statute to fill any gaps in our legislation. But we cannot, like the proverbial ostrich, bury our heads in the sand. We must confront the reality that is. This legislation recognizes that acts committed in public places with the intention of causing people widespread fear, acts that are motivated by way of hatred against a particular person or persons or groups of persons, and involving dangerous weapons, have to be dealt with seriously by the law. They have to be dealt with as a real threat to public safety, as they are, Mr. Speaker. Every citizen of the country has a right to go about their business without having to look around their shoulder. And every time you see an act of violence described in the media, it is often heartening to hear the concerns about people that they don't feel that they can walk about in safety anymore. A couple moments ago, I was having a discussion with the Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central, and he was telling me about the difficulties he was having in certain parts of his constituency where he fears going. And every time he goes into the community, there is this apprehension on his part that there is some incident that is likely to happen or may happen. And that is a normal member of parliament going about his elected duty to consult with his people. I can confess, Mr. Speaker, that I don't have those fears in the constituency of St. Thomas. But certainly, we all live in one Barbados. And what I would like for myself, I would wish for the Honourable Member of Christchurch West Central, and indeed all the other members of this House, and indeed Bajans, as they go about their business. So when individuals engage in the conduct that is intended to terrorize the country, they are not merely attacking victims, they are attacking all of us. They are attacking our security, our sense of security, and our sense of peace. And the bill, therefore, is intended to send a strong message, Mr. Speaker, that we as a country will not tolerate the continuation or the exacerbation of this level of callous violence in the country. We will not tolerate people having to live in fear. The heavy hand of the state, you will hear as a criticism that we are now creating a double offense, but sir, this is necessary. But the more important consideration for me, sir, is that the bill is measured and proportionate. This legislation is not aimed, sir, at the ordinary petty criminal. It is not aimed, sir, to target any specific individuals. This legislation targets a particular type of conduct, not an individual. It establishes clear thresholds that the offense must be classified first as domestic terrorism. The conduct must constitute a serious criminal offense in that regard. And secondly, which is more important, it must satisfy criteria such as being committed in a public place with the intention of causing fear, being motivated by some kind of prejudice or hatred, Mr. Speaker, or involving firearms, ammunition in circumstances that pose a significant threat to public safety. Now, the Learned Attorney General did point out that it made some contribution when we were in Cabinet discussing the bill. And I'm not trying to draw attention to myself, but it is really important that we not only criminalize or seek to address the behavior of those persons actually conducting an act of terror by way of the shooting or by the leaving of some device that explode in the community to cause some terror, but the people who import these things, knowing that these things can cause significant harm in the community, must be addressed, and I'm happy to associate myself with that being included in this bill. Sir, the requirements that the law requires for an act of domestic terrorism to be constituted as such does not cast an overly wide net. It is directed at the most serious of criminal conduct that threatens the society. And I think that any criticism that may be heaped on government in the social media sphere or elsewhere, sir, must be balanced by the fact that we are addressing something that is urgent, but we are doing so in a way that is proportionate. Some people may ask, Mr. Speaker, why are the penalties so severe? I would submit, sir, that they are not. The penalties are proportionate to the gravity of the conduct that is being addressed. Both the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central and the City of Bridgetown, Christchurch East, the Honourable Attorney General, and the Honourable Member for the City of Bridgetown explain the level of the gravity of the offences being concerned. When murder is committed as an act of domestic terrorism, Mr. Speaker, the bill provides for the most serious of consequences, life imprisonment. Where other serious offences are committed, life imprisonment. And that reflects a fundamental principle of justice, Mr. Speaker, which we must all associate with, that those who deliberately seek to terrorize the communities in the country and endanger life on a larger scale must face the consequences of their action, and long sentences of imprisonment meets that threshold. The bill, sir, does not attempt to replace existing law. And that might be one of the concerns of some members of the public who are not necessarily versed in the law. This is not replacing existing law. The offender must still be prosecuted for the underlying offense. The legislation recognizes, however, that the additional harm caused by the offense, the way in which it was intended to create that level of widespread fear in the community, warrants further attention, particularly at the sentencing stage. An accused person will still have to go to court, will still have the availability to be able to mount their defense as against the primary charge and the charge of domestic terrorism. The jury will hear the facts. And if convicted, sir, the judge will have to make a determination on the basis of what is the appropriate sentence as it relates to the seriousness of that offense and whether the threshold of domestic terrorism is satisfied by the legislation. So the court becomes the ultimate tribunal to determine whether the underlying offense has been satisfied, whether the offense of domestic terrorism has been satisfied, and if guilt or innocence is pronounced by the jury, then the court at the sentencing stage, or if they have to discharge the individual if they are found not guilty, makes a decision. But the courts make the ultimate decision and not Parliament. We can draw the line by passing the legislation, but this is not a government intended to put a heavy hand on the system. Fairness is determined by the courts. Sir, in closing, I believe that the legislation appropriately meets the required threshold for what is reasonable action on the part of the government, and I am happily joined with the honourable members who have spoken to associate myself with the bill, and I commend the Learned Attorney General for bringing the bill. I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for Christchurch South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I will speak briefly as well in support of the bill. I grew up in a community, Mr. Speaker, sir, in which I have a clear recollection of one night sitting on the steps of my house with a friend, and a few meters away, a car stopped and some young men got out of it, faces covered, with guns in their hands, and went across to the house right opposite mine. That was some years ago, living in that neighborhood. As a student of sociology at the University of West Indies, one of the studies that I did was again on gang violence. And that interest came, again, because of the neighborhood and what I was experiencing. So as part of that study, I had to go and visit a number of gangs, talk to people, at least what were suggested to be gangs, spend some time, talk to the members, just to kind of understand the sociological tenets behind behavior and behavior patterns. I understood, Mr. Speaker, sir, that even amongst, again, what were perceived as gangs and the level of violence that was happening across Barbados at that time, that there was a set of expected behavior and rules that governed how they operated. There were unspoken, unwritten rules around how you treated to the church, the elderly, and so on, that have somehow become eroded. And I believe that as a society, that we need to be able to come to grips with which the social fractures within our societies are such that the responses and approaches have to be able to change and have to be able to meet the time. So that the response of 10 years ago to a level of violence and the issues of crime and violence and so-called gangs have always been with us. But where the approach changes, where the level changes, where the damage changes, then the state and the society has a responsibility to be able to meet that requisite change. There has been an outcry across Barbados for the government to be able to have a considered response to the society's fears, to our feeling of insecurity within our homes, within our communities, to the level of insecurity that prevents many of us from walking freely across Barbados. And the government has been responding to that in a variety of ways. Not all of them having to do with how we can exercise our authority in the realm of law, legislation. But we have been doing so through a number of other policies and programs. We have been doing so through our Project Dawn, our block transformation program, reaching directly into blocks to offer alternatives. What we are doing in our One Family program to attempt to address the systemic issues of vulnerability within families that are at risk, to remove some of those at-risk factors. It is evident in what we have been doing in terms of offering expanded training and training programs, whether through programs like Construction Gateway, expanded programs for agricultural training. I know just recently at the Hope Agricultural Training Facility, there have been courses in apiculture, again, particularly directed at young men and other entrepreneurs who would want to get into new alternatives, Mr. Speaker, sir. Not just the traditional areas, but new alternatives. So that the policy response to what we have been saying in terms of the social fractures and the change in the level and typology of the violence is nuanced. It is nuanced. And I hope that that is recognized and appreciated. The government is not applying one lens to look at this issue, but that the response is multifaceted. I've said in other spheres that the initiatives to address this cannot only rely on government alone, but it must be societal. But in that effort to be able to address comprehensively what we are seeing in our society, the government has to use effectively the tools at its disposal. This bill is essentially a signal to those within our society that would want to exacerbate and instill that sense of fear, deliberately so, recklessly so, that as a society and as a government, that we will not tolerate it. It is a signal to those who are responsible for the perpetration of those acts that the government will meet you at the level of your own response, with the threshold of responsibility that we have heard from the Honourable Member for St. Thomas. That the bill clearly frames the actions in the context, one, of the threshold at which you are attempting to instill a level of fear and recklessness in your action in a public space. In a public space in which children, mothers, ordinary members of the public that have nothing to do with whatsoever the underlying reasons for whatever action is taken, that we have a duty of care to be able to protect them. That there is no excuse for willy-nilly going into an open space, a pastor, a mall, a church area, God forbid, and openly seeking to endanger lives without cause or thought. That is the reason, Mr. Speaker, sir, for this bill. It therefore adds to a frame of the nuanced approach of what this government is intended to do. Mr. Speaker, sir, we've heard, again, of the improvements in relation to what we're doing with the police service, the enhancements in relation to the Barbados Defence Force, the multi-pronged approach to increasing policing. Mr. Speaker, sir, there's a commitment through this government's social programming to shoring up parenting, making sure that parents can have the necessary training and resources that they need. What we are doing in education transformation, Mr. Speaker, sir, is also part of this issue. Sociologists would suggest that it's not just the individual pathology, they call it, that is responsible for criminal acts, but that it is the entirety of all of the major tenets of society that go in to be able to make up that whole frame. But they also challenge, as I said before, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the governments and governments have a responsibility in order to be able to effectively apply the necessary tools. My support, Mr. Speaker, sir, for this bill is placed, yes, in general support because we understand the tenets, but also a fundamental understanding that this stands side by side with everything else that this government is doing in order to be able to address this question and in order to ensure citizens' security. There was a report, Mr. Speaker, sir, I believe it was in 2022, on the issue of citizen security. And that was for the region and not specifically for Barbados. But it highlighted that, again, for many people across the region, ordinary citizens, it was a household survey, that there was an increased feeling of insecurity. Insecurity. Citizens were generally feeling that they were no longer secure within their homes and within their communities. As I close, Mr. Speaker, sir, it would be irresponsible of us as a government not to be able to hear, to understand, to feel, because there are many of us who've spoken previously in previous fora about their own personal experiences within their communities or constituencies, with the level of violence. And Mr. Speaker, so I want to make it clear, as has been reiterated. This is not responding to the whole universe of violence. I'm going to use the word regular, but this is responding to an elevated level of violence. That the bill is seeking to be able to say, if you operate within a context, again, of a public space, with the responsibility of the prosecution to be able to make a case that singly says that you have been reckless and that there is intent to instill fear. Creating a responsible frame, Mr. Speaker, sir, for this bill to operate. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm obliged.
Honourable Leader Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I, like all other colleagues, would wish to echo the same sentiment that I believe that the legislation that we come to this place here today is necessary given where we have found ourselves as a country. I believe that Barbados has witnessed some levels of violence perhaps only otherwise seen in other places, not traditionally associated with our small island. And in ways and in manners that perhaps, again, do not resemble who we are as a people. Many of these acts of violence do more than just kill or injure individuals. In many cases, the acts of violence that we have been talking about and that are referenced in this particular legislation actually impact communities. They have impacted also our children. They have impacted the elderly population in many of our communities. They cause people, sir, to look over the shoulder. They cause, as you've heard, sometimes even members of parliament to question whether they should be in these spaces. And sir, as an attorney, I'm sure that you too have had cause at times to wonder if the place in which you are, if you really should be. And it is not because we fear or we should have this and carry this fear, but I believe that the circumstances of the day have caused many of us sometimes to reflect on whether we are in spaces where we ought to be, or whether we should leave before certain events finish, or even at times if we should even go into those spaces. I don't think the 30 MPs that have been elected by the people of Barbados are any different than the rest of the Barbados population. I think all of us at some point in time have had to pause as we have seen events unfolding over the last couple of years to determine whether we venture into, in particular, public spaces, as this particular piece of legislation is intended to identify spaces where these types of incidents happen. When we see these levels of violence, it also causes parents to worry when their children leave home. I have, sir, been, I don't want to say the recipient, but I guess vicariously I've become the recipient of high levels of violence in a community that I represent. I have seen the impact on the elderly population, elderly people not wanting to go anywhere, not come out to events. I have seen the impact on communities when we have acts of violence displayed where children are playing in a play park and they have to scamper for their lives because right on the block where there may actually be a play park is an act of violence, a senseless act of violence that takes the life sometimes of the intended victim and in some cases of unintended victims as well. Because when people go to fire a shot at one person, sometimes there are many unintended victims as a result of the consequences of what they have gone to do. I have also seen, sir, children not being able to go back out and play in spaces that this government has built out for them to allow them to be able to recreate, to come out of densely populated households, to be able to go into spaces where they can go on slides and they can climb on monkey bars because parents then fear the reality that an incident that may have taken place can happen again, sir. I have also seen, sir, situations where persons that have been employed gainfully, working as part of a team, cleaning our communities in broad daylight, sir, have had a gunman just come into the community and in broad daylight in front of old people, young people, and the people that have worked closely with the individual, just unleash gunfire, stand over a young man in broad daylight and just shoot unmercifully until his body was lifeless, sir. I have watched, sir, a mother, and this is the first time it has ever happened to me, I have watched a mother kneel down in a road and wipe the road with a bucket of water and her bare hands, sir, to clean the road of the blood stain of her son's blood in a road, Mr. Speaker. In a community that regrettably has almost gotten accustomed to the sight of gun violence and this display of reckless and senseless killing, sir. So I don't know that I can be silent on some things, but I don't know that having dealt with this from a personal standpoint, where I have actually known the families, I've known some of the victims as well personally. I have at times been accused of knowing too many people on the other side of the world, sir, but you know, I grew up very grounded as a young kid coming up in the community of St. Michael's Southeast with my father as a representative, knowing people of all walks of life, those in high places, in low places, sir. Some of these people are God brothers. They have played in my house. And because of paths people have taken, they have ended up in situations that perhaps are not the most positive, sir. But it doesn't mean that I don't know them. I am not ashamed of knowing people in high and low places, sir. In fact, I believe that that is what has made me who I am, because I don't forget where I have come from. So when I speak not only because I can walk with the kings and the queens, sir, but I can also work with the people, and I can walk amongst the people who I understand what my responsibility is as a representative to pull them from out of their plight. So I agree today, sir, that this legislation that the Honourable Attorney General has worked on, that his predecessor has also worked on, and our amazing team that we have of members of parliament that have been able to input into this legislation, along with the drafters, have been able to craft something that is unique to Barbados. Because when we think of terrorism, we think of a different level of terrorism. But we have seen a level of people being terrorized by gun violence in a way that has manifested itself in this little island that none of us want to see this continue to be the order of the day. And therefore, it requires a government not simply only to legislate and to talk, but to make sure that we have the necessary teeth in place and the necessary legislation to make sure that these incidences, not that they won't happen again, sir, but that we have the necessary legislation in place in the event that they do happen to be able to address the senseless killings that we see across the country. The Honourable Prime Minister herself has made the case for stronger legal tools after, I believe it was a January shooting in Bridgetown, which left 10 people injured, arguing that there's a difference between committing a serious crime and deliberately creating widespread panic and terrorism. And now we come today to be able to bring before this Honourable Chamber the Domestic Terrorism Bill, which, as I said, today I think we have to make something very absolutely clear. And the fact is that passing a law is not the same thing as solving a problem. Sir, the community that I represent, while I believe my constituents welcome the legislation, there is still a reality that many of them face. There's a reality that they live in densely populated community, which for the most part, many of them, because of the overcrowded conditions, sometimes they have to go outside into the open spaces because the houses are so cramped. And therefore, I know our position as a government is to ease the housing conditions of those who live in those areas, to be able to make sure that we are able to allow people to breathe a little bit easier. Mr. Speaker, these are what we have before us really is not theoretical. These issues of violence are not theoretical. And they're not simply statistics that we can raise here in terms of that every year we are seeing an increase in these types of violence offenses. The reality is that the people who are dying, they have names. The people who are dying, they have families. The people who are fearing when they are in these spaces, from the Sheraton facility to other public spaces, these are real people that we are dealing with. Real people that, whether we like it or not, the consequences for these people who witness gun violence leaves a lasting impression on their lives, sir. I deal with it daily. I deal with it when the children who have to watch their brothers get killed in front of them, how they have to then deal with other people in the community, how they have to then interface in the school environment, how they then become the subject of conflict because they have dealt with unresolved conflict as a result of not being able to address the issues of loss and grief that they have encountered, sir. The reality is that when we bury these persons, sir, and when these persons have committed these types of crimes, we are burying mothers. Sometimes we are burying fathers. We are leaving behind children without, in many cases, the male representation in their households. So yes, we will pass laws, but we also have a responsibility to look as well beyond the legislation at the fact that we speak of chronic non-communicable diseases as another illness that we have to deal with and a threat to our society, but we are also dealing with the grief and the losses that we encounter when we lose male members of our population who leave behind children who do not have that father figure, sir, who themselves are grappling mentally to be able to adjust to the loss that has been imposed on them by people who determined that it was okay to take somebody else's life. So while we bring legislation, we need to also address these issues where we see children who have faced within communities the killing of persons in this way, ensuring that our agencies are responsive to those households. Because while we bury the dead, we are also dealing with the mental health of those that are left behind that have to carry the pain and the loss of nobody taking the time sometimes to be able to help those children to adjust or to help those families to adjust. One of the realities I see, Mr. Speaker, oftentimes is that in densely populated communities, the little children, the adults, the grandparents, everybody in the same space. So when somebody comes to talk about these vicious acts of terrorism that have taken place, you have a situation where the children in the same household hearing about how the person riddled the individual on the ground, stood over them, and riddled them with all kinds of bullets. And they had machine guns. And the little children are sitting there taking in all of the bad energy and the karma of what it is that transpired to their loved one. They're also taking in, Mr. Speaker, the fact that every conversation around them is a conversation of who can get back at somebody, who can make sure that there is revenge for the killing of the person that they have lost as a result of this type of domestic terrorism, Mr. Speaker. So we can't just talk about legislation in isolation. We got to talk about the consequences of crime as well, because we are raising a society and a generation of young people that are angry. They're happy with us for passing laws, but they're also angry because they have had to deal with the unresolved conflict that is associated with the grief that they carry because they're in cramped spaces hearing things that little children should not hear. I remember growing up, Mr. Speaker, there was a big table in the house and there was a small table. And the small table was for the children. Many of you would know about it. Small children, little children had to go by that table. And that's where we ate. And it was only when you reach a certain age, Mr. Speaker, that you could elevate to the big table if you were lucky, if they had room on that table for you. My reality is different, sir. The big, the small, the old, the young, in the same space, when these conversations about how we're going to retaliate and how we're going to deal with the unresolved issues are taking place within our communities. So we have had as a government to deal with the end result. But I want to talk for a few minutes about what we do before we get to this point. Because certainly when I was Minister of Education, one of the studies that was done showed us that a number of the children who were coming before the criminal justice system were children who had experienced these types of issues where they saw the violence taking place. They were in the space and they were caught up in the melee of people running from this violent scene. Or, as has happened right at a community center down in my own constituency, little children playing on a pasture, gunmen come down, shoot a 16-year-old boy in cold blood, and children are playing nearby. And before the police, the ambulance, or anybody else could get there, sir, the children are looking over the young man and seeing all of the blood oozing from his body in broad daylight, sir. We as a society have to address that as well. And we must put the mechanisms in place to make sure that we're not just going to take up the bodies when they are dead, but that we are also doing the deeper investigative studies to recognize that crime does not only impact the victim, but that there are sometimes many other victims at the scene of the crime that we also have to identify and that we also have to address, Mr. Speaker. When children witness violence, something has gone terribly wrong. Most of the children in my community can tell you the stories of having seen gun violence. Something that, sir, I think many of us, older adults, it's a rarity in our lifetime. I've been to many scenes of crime. But the reality is I've never seen anybody killed in cold blood. But my children in the community can tell me the stories of what they have seen, not what they have heard, sir, but what they have seen. And we have a duty to protect them from those things. So, sir, the last speaker who spoke gave an excellent account of all of this work that we are doing. This government has perhaps done more in terms of its youth programs than any other administration, sir. We have lots happening, Minister of Sports, we have things happening from community development to be able to make sure that our young people are engaged. But sir, if you've had the opportunity to run a summer camp, you will recognize that we also still have a lot of the conflicts within the camps. And I don't know how teachers are coping in the educational institutions, sir, because I have had the opportunity to oversee a summer camp or two. And my heart goes out to them because the issues I see, and I see the member for the city nodding his head, the issues that I see being borne out in a 5 or 6 week program, I tip my hat to our teachers, I must say, because I have seen the counselors struggle with the issues of conflict. Conflict that when you dig deep in communities is as a result of the same acts that we are talking of violence and terrorism that has fueled from the streets into the households, into the communities, and into the same so-called safe spaces of schools and within the summer camps, sir. So perhaps while we encourage our young people to get involved and people to be a part of the summer camp program, I think we need some older people as well helping to mentor some of them, because I think some of the young ones, they are interested in being able to support the children, but I think that we have to recognize that just as we have put the support within the educational system with the safety officers and we've put additional guidance counselors, that we cannot take our hand off the ball. We also have to recognize that the summer camps are really an extension of school, and that maybe the time has come for us to be able to look at how we can extend that mentoring and that support within the summer camp program, because again, you have a captive audience of young people to be able to take that information to the fore. Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity recently, because I have taken a position that it don't make no sense quarreling about the violence. We are doing what we are supposed to do as a government. But I believe that I have always been one who leads by example, and I put my thoughts, what I see, to action. And I've taken the position that I cannot save every child in my constituency, but I will do the best job I can to save the ones that I can. I take the view, Mr. Speaker, that before we get to the point where legislation becomes necessary, we have had enough evidence from the statistics, the criminal statistics, all of the criminologists that have written on this issue, that we have already identified some of the social issues that exist in relation to where we see pockets of crime associated with pockets of poverty. We have seen schools written in reports where we see the same behaviors being borne out, the same young people going to certain schools, ending up in our prison establishment. Mr. Speaker, you work in the law courts. You are familiar with what I say. I am not taking tales out of school. There is a reality. And therefore, what I believe we must do as a matter of urgency is address our minds to the additional resources that are needed in specific institutions and in specific communities to be able to target where we are seeing those numbers rising and those persons who are committing the acts of domestic terrorism taking place. I have a program, Mr. Speaker, called Reset. A Reset Weekend where it was a combined approach with Inspire Life Solutions and the Barbados Defense Force to be able to work together to take 50 young people from across St. Michael Southeast into a weekend retreat to be able to reset their minds, to reset their thinking, and to be able to have an ongoing program, both short, medium, and long term with them. In other words, we are not simply taking a photo op or using the opportunity for a photo op to say that we did something, sir, but we have done the assessment of the children, understood what are the challenges that the children are facing within the community and within the households, and we have determined that we will work with some of these kids and their households to be able to have an ongoing mentorship. And why, sir? Why have I chosen boys? I have done work with girls before, but I have felt that as a female, it is going to be very difficult for me to understand how the male, not only their anatomy, but how the male mind works. And therefore, I have felt that the best people to assist with those types of programs is actually males, is actually whether men from the community themselves who have been able to not only come from a community, but also to rise above their community. People who have not just allowed their circumstances to define who they are. We've also determined that in many cases, these young men will not often see the type of positive male figures that is required for them. And what we have done is we said, look, the best discipline must come from the highest office in the land, which for me is the Barbados Defense Force. And we have basically worked with them to be able to design a program that instead of us being consistently burying young men, our hope is that we can be celebrating our young men because we have put in place the modeling to allow men to be able to work with young men. Sir, I want to take this opportunity to commend the Barbados Defense Force and its leadership for the role that they played in that program. I am not selfish, sir. I believe that something like that can be rolled out across all of our communities, obviously with the steps that we've taken to make sure that we understand the children that are coming and that we can work with them. But what I saw in that program that weekend was something that I believe is positive for our young men. Children went from being perhaps a little rowdy to being able to transition with the stern hand of the officers and also the empathy, the little pat on the shoulder, to being able to turn themselves around within that weekend and come away from there wanting to be better than how they came in. And I think that there are enough people in our society that can assist us with these types of programs, that before we get to the point where we have to be coming and bringing this type of legislation, we need the intervention program, sir, that will stop our young men in particular from being able to find themselves in front of a law court or ending up dead. As I said, we cannot save all, we will never save all, but I believe that if each of us take the responsibility for a couple young men from the communities, understand their backgrounds, understand their challenges, and with the help of the churches, with the help of the corporate communities, sir, I believe that there is enough goodwill out there across the board that we can have these programs as not the exception, sir, but I believe that we can have these Minister of Education, I know, is working on a program as well to be able to introduce things like this. And I support those types of programs, sir, because I believe that we are losing too many of our young men to violent crime, and we are seeing the repeat of the cycle which is taking place as a result of us not being able to stem the decline and do the interventions that are necessary with our young people when they are exposed to crime. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe we need laws that will give our police and our prosecutors the tools that they need as well to be able to ensure that they can fight the criminal elements in our society. And we need laws that are capable of dealing directly with the people who deliberately use violence to terrorize communities. But we cannot legislate our way out of every social problem, because a law does not raise a child, a law does not mentor a young man, a law does not treat to addiction, a law does not deal with the issues of mental health that face many of our young people across our communities. A law does not put a job in the hands of somebody who has lost hope. A law does not ensure that, even as we pass this today, that those people who are contemplating getting involved in crime, that they will sit down and say, well, look at them. They sit down in the house and they pass a law to deter me, but I'm going to still go ahead and do what I have to do, sir. It requires an all-of-country approach. It requires an all-of-community approach. It requires an all-of-people approach to be able to fight the battle as it relates to these types of aggressive acts of terrorism and violence in our society, because a law does not also repair the broken family. So we need enforcement, but we also need to see elements of prevention. We need policing, but we also need heavily to see greater community policing as well. So I believe the member for the city is working on that, but I believe that just as the Barbados Defence Force has been at the forefront of helping us with these young men, I look forward to us being able to engage with the Commissioner of Police and the rest of the team to see how the police outpost can perhaps be strengthened, because in our community of St. Michael Southeast, I think that is one of the biggest challenges. It is not seen as a deterrent. And therefore, I think that we need to put our heads together and to figure out ways in which the community outposts can be more effective, and how community policing can also be an intervention method in being able to combat the criminal acts and criminal intent as we have been seeing it taking place. And therefore, I want to commend, as I started at the outset, the Honourable Attorney General and the team. I know that this has not been an easy road to getting us here. I know that for those who are perhaps watching and certainly listening, for Barbados to even use the two words in the same sentence seems as though we have come to a particular point in our history, but these are our realities, and I don't think that we are seeing anything happening in Barbados that is not happening in the rest of the Caribbean, and that is not happening in the rest of the world. What we, however, are prepared to do as a government is to respond and to prepare ourselves to be in a position to respond, so that if, in fact, there are persons who are the victims of these types of offenses, or the perpetrators of these offenses, that we as a society can deal with them in the fullness of time. So with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I am obliged.
Honourable Member Christchurch East.
Sir, allow me to start by thanking all of my colleagues who intervened or commented on this signal piece of legislation. I think we are all of one mind where this is concerned. Sir, I've been getting a number of messages which I often look at, sir, in order to determine what my wrap-up should be, because you get some comments from persons that I didn't understand this, or I didn't understand that, or what does this mean? So I just wish to clarify a couple points of the bill. Sir, if we look at the objects and reasons of the bill, a bill may have many objects and reasons. This one is very, very simple. Objects and reasons are found at the front of any bill or any act. And it says, this bill would make provision for the penalization of persons who commit acts of domestic terrorism. This is as clear and as simple as it gets. This is not about rehabilitation. This is not about counseling. This is about penalties. This is about punishment if you cross the line into acts of domestic terrorism, our concern is how to suitably punish you for what you have inflicted upon the people of Barbados and the society. The other thing, sir, normally when a penalty is in legislation, like you will see something in one piece of legislation, you see that a person who does this is liable on indictment to a fine of up to $500,000. And you see in another paragraph that a person, another clause, sir, a person who commits this offense is liable to imprisonment for 10 years on the first offense. Whereas the second offense, I think the Firearms Act has that imprisonment for not less than 20 years. And persons ask, what is the range of offenses? And they were unclear as to what I had indicated in relation to the exposure to penalties for the varying degrees of the baseline offense that would attract domestic terrorism. I wish to make this clear. Clause 3, I'll read it and then I'll explain it. A person who commits an act of domestic terrorism commits an offense and is liable on conviction or indictment where the serious criminal offense committed is murder to A, suffer death, or B, imprisonment for life. Where the offense is other than murder, to imprisonment for life. So there's no limitation of a fine. There's no limitation of years. If your act of domestic terrorism results in somebody dying, the court has the range up to hanging, up to suffering death or the death penalty, and if it deems not to do the death penalty, up to imprisonment for life. The court is not capped in its jurisdiction or its penalties for domestic terrorism. The whole range of options is available to the court. Where the offense is other than murder, to imprisonment for life. So let us use as an example, sir, if I go and discharge a firearm and shoot at somebody, where there are 10 people there. It's in a public place, the public is there, those 10 people might fear for their life. The court may see fit to sentence me to 20 years. If I go, sir, and discharge the same amount of shots at a public activity on Farley Hill, where there are 15,000 people, for exactly the same amount of shots in the same place, then the court can sentence me up to life imprisonment. The court can look at the circumstances of the offense, and it has the full range of sentences. Where nobody's life is lost, the court can sentence you up to life imprisonment. And we know, sir, up to life imprisonment starts with 0 and goes up to life imprisonment. I will however suggest, sir, that if you are found guilty of domestic terrorism, you cannot even be looking for leniency from the court as a 0 or probation. The hammer will drop. If, as a result of your actions, you are found guilty of domestic terrorism and your actions have cost somebody their life, the court has sentencing options up to the death penalty. And if for some reason it decides not to impose a death penalty, up to life imprisonment. I don't think I can be any more clear, sir, than that. And if we look at Clause 3, Part 4, it says, to make it pellucidly clear, the commission of an act of domestic terrorism shall be considered to be an aggravating factor which should be taken into account when imposing a sentence on a person who commits a serious criminal offense. So the fact that you are found guilty of domestic terrorism is an aggravating factor. That is why the sentence runs consecutively. It is an add-on. It will lengthen whatever sentence the court was minded to pronounce on you for the baseline offense. I think that is probably as clear as I can make that. Sir, this is a landmark piece of legislation, and it's the creation of a necessary offense. As the honourable member for the city said, sir, we have done a lot in terms of our criminal landscape and our suite of criminal legislation in terms of imposing penalties and giving options to the court on how to deal with persons who perpetrate crimes against individuals or against the society at large. We have the anti-gang legislation, we had the gun court, we had the witness protection legislation. Sir, there's a lot more coming down the pipe. This is another one in a suite of legislation. It's a signal one. It's one that I guess hitherto had not been contemplated, but necessity has made it expedient to do so. As short as this bill is, sir, we did consult with the Barbados Bar Association in relation to this bill. We took the liberty of consulting with the judges who do criminal law as well, because it makes no sense to impose a piece of legislation in circumstances it would be difficult for the court to apply it. So up front, we said, let us have a conversation with those judges who preside over criminal cases to find out what's workable. Right? The policy was ours, but the application of it, it makes sense to consult A, with the lawyers who will be representing the clients, and B, with the judges who at the end of the day have to pass on the sentence. So we did benefit from there. We also consulted, sir, with the DPP, some stakeholders and the Law Reform Commission. So as short as this bill is short, 5 pages, including the cover page. The substantive part of this bill, sir, is effectively 2.5 pages long. So it's one of the shortest bills I've ever presented, but no less impactful and meaningful because of its brevity. But however, as brief as it was, I can assure you, sir, I have never had as wide consultation on something. I have never gone back at it to change a word here, to remove a sentence, to add in a clause, to take out a clause, to consider something else than we have done in this. It's going to be tested in the court of law. Because of the severity of it, whoever is the first person to be found guilty on this, especially when you're looking at life imprisonment, whereas you might have previously been looking at less than 20 years for something, so it will be tested. The person who feels the brunt of this has nothing to lose. Have nothing to lose, sir, by testing this bill. I see you, sir, nodding, because I realize that you're nodding at certain points in the bill, sir. And I do urge, that's what law, we are here to pass laws, right? We are here to pass laws. The courts are there to create jurisprudence. The courts are there to interpret and to apply the laws. Defense counsel have a job to do. They're there to challenge the laws, right? And sir, but let us not even be confused as to the import of this. It was necessary that we, as the government of the Republic of Barbados, step up to the plate to give the people comfort that we have their backs and that we are doing what we can to combat this scourge. It's not about perfection for this one, sir. It's about doing something. Everybody is not going to agree. And if for some reason a challenge is made and we have to refine it, we will refine it. If we see a way to improve it, we'll improve it. There may arise circumstances that create other predicate offenses or recognize other offenses that are worthy of being considered, at which point, sir, we will do that as well. Right? But right now, it is necessary for us to pass this to give the people of Barbados comfort. This, sir, at the end of the day, is about keeping Barbados safe and harshly, to the fullest extent of the law, punishing those who challenge our peace, safety, and security. And sir, having explained that, I hope that I have answered all of the other questions. We will no doubt, sir, I will lean upon the Honourable Member for St. Thomas to assist me with the public education on this, because it is setting a new regime and imposing perhaps the strictest penalties under any law in Barbados, and the widest range to the court. So we will have to publicly explain what is at stake so people can inform themselves as to how to not run afoul of this. But having said all of that, sir, I wish to commend this to you and ask that this bill be read for a second time.
The question is that this bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Sir, I beg that you do. Sir, I beg you do now leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
This Honourable House is now in committee.
Mr. Chairman, Clause 1.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 1 do not stand part.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Mr. Chairman, I beg that Clause 2 do not stand part.
The question is that Clause 2 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 3.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 3 now do not stand part.
The question is that Clause 3. The question is that Clause 3 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do not report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. Seconded.
The question is that I do not report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The report on the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now read for a third time.
Question is that this bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Domestic Terrorism Act of 2026.
The question is that the bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
Mr. Speaker, order number 7. in the name of the Minister of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, to move the movement of a resolution to approve in accordance with Section 5 of the Land Acquisition Act, Cap 228, approve the compulsory acquisition by the state of the parcel of land property of the Ebenezer Methodist Church, situate at Ebenezer in the parish of St. Philip in this island, and more particularly described in the schedule hereto for the public purpose of housing development.
Honourable Member St. Michael West.
Mr. Speaker, I rise this morning to seek the approval of this Honourable House for the compulsory acquisition of approximately 8,940 square meters or 2.21 acres of land at Ebenezer St. Philip for the public purpose of a housing development. This resolution is brought pursuant to Cabinet's approval and the statutory process governing compulsory acquisition for a public purpose, sir. To some, Mr. Speaker, this may seem like an ordinary acquisition, very small piece of land, a routine matter. But, Mr. Speaker, those who only see a couple acres of land fail to see the potential, the future that can be built upon it. 2 acres here, 3 acres there, it adds up, sir. And Mr. Speaker, in an island that is 166 square miles, we must be very resourceful in the way in which we use our land resources, whether it be in agriculture. And Mr. Speaker, when it comes to agriculture, we have to obviously use more technology, vertical farming and greenhouses in order to utilize our land resources more adequately. And so it must be the same in housing as well, sir. And as I'll present this morning, we also have to look at our traditional density in terms of just using single lots and going more to duplexes and quads, sir. And this is something that I will show today. So, sir, every parcel of land becomes a school, becomes a hospital, a playing field, a housing development. And that is what we're doing today, sir. Today, we're laying another foundation stone in the future of Barbados. This housing development, as I will show here today, presents part of a larger housing program that can transform not only people's lives, but transform housing into an economic engine for our country as well. Now, Mr. Speaker, you've heard the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast, the Honourable Prime Minister, lay down the philosophy behind a vibrant housing program. If we build 2,000 homes annually at an average investment, approximately, she's used this example before, of $200,000 per home, that represents approximately $400 million yearly that will be pumped throughout our economy. And let's think about that for a second. Economic activity of this magnitude, 400 million a year, that supports Barbadian businesses. It supports the procurement process for hardware stores. It supports Barbadian families. Every house requires surveyors, architects, engineers, planners, electricians, steel benders, and obviously in the transportation process as well, truck drivers, heavy equipment operators, roofers, landscapers. And that only scratches the surface, Mr. Speaker. If you factor in the financial institutions in the issuance of mortgages, the credit unions, then insurance companies, furniture stores, appliance suppliers, hardware retailers, internet providers, solar installers, Mr. Speaker, this has an effect of creating a web through our economy that supports multiple businesses who employ people in this country, sir. Every completed home continues to generate economic activity long after construction has ended. Housing, therefore, becomes one of the strongest economic multipliers, sir, available to any government. And, Mr. Speaker, let's talk about why this matters. The truth is that economic activity as has been articulated by the Honourable Prime Minister, is very important for our third term as a government, sir. Is important not simply just to build or rebuild, but to grow with purpose. Growth that strengthens our social safety net, sir. Growth that allows this government to invest more in health care, more in education, more in climate resilience to protect our reefs, sir. Growth that allows the QEH to purchase MRI machines, to purchase the linear accelerator that you saw the hospital just purchased, so that we can be able to treat to our women who are afflicted with that horrible disease of breast cancer, sir. And these are the things that we have to do for our people, and that's what an economic boom does for our country. Sir, this is not growth just for statistics, but it's growth for our people. We've been able to raise the minimum wage, to vest paternal leave with our men, plan out the implementation of the Republic Children Wealth Fund, sir. These are things that we've had the wiggle room to be able to do for our people, or plan to do, sir. And we can't do it with empty pockets, Mr. Speaker. We do so when the treasury is full. The stability of our pocket, or of our economy, good fiscal management and growth enables us to be able to be progressive for our people. And that is the deeper meaning and roots of a progressive government, sir. So, Mr. Speaker, Barbados has entered into a new era of housing. As I mentioned before, we have to deal with the density. We have to go away from the old model of planning 7 houses per acre. And the Prime Minister has been very poignant in making this point, in that we have to utilize our land resources more efficiently, sir. So our new model in any housing development that we enter into in the future will encompass duplexes, quads, apartments, townhouses. We're looking at single lots where we're going to have duplexes. Sir, these things are done far and away overseas, where you have the condominium style, not only just with multi-story, but you have the duplexes on single lots, where a lot of young professionals will buy into that. We're going to make the designs very attractive, so that I'm very certain that they will. So with that new design philosophy, Mr. Speaker, we hope to be able to squeeze as many as 30 units, houses, onto this particular site, sir. And sir, whether it's in Vineyard, Bright Hall, Hanson, or Searles, a balance will be struck with the increasing housing density while preserving green space and respecting the physical development plan, sir. And why is this important? Because the truth is that you heard the Honourable Member for St. Michael Southeast mention this about the density and the overcrowding in the Pine and in her constituency, sir. So we have to be able to design these housing developments not only with density and efficient use of land in mind, but also with green spaces, sir. And also, you know, the Honourable Member for St. John has done a very good job as well in putting in these outdoor gyms and things like these, which we should be able to design these housing developments with those in mind too, so that we can concentrate also on wellness for our citizens, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, the formula to achieve our goals is simple. We start with the land. We have the planning permission. You're throwing the sprinkle, the joint venture. And then you have a house and housing development. And so far, this formula has been promising. You saw that the Honourable Prime Minister launched the housing development at Vineyard, which will be a benefit to the Honourable members from St. Philip. And in that process, you saw that all of what I mentioned will be encompassed in that development. That, sir, is also another joint venture that started with land, sir. And Mr. Speaker, I had the honor and the privilege to attend the launching of Deanstown Heights in St. James, along with the Honourable Member for St. Andrew. And this is a joint venture between the NHC and the COB Credit Union, sir. Sir, this is also not a large plot of land. However, It will have 34 service lots, and these lots will be designed into modern homes, and the construction firm will use modern technology to be able to accomplish this project, sir. And the thing that I can say about these types of developments is that these developments, such as Deanstown and Ebenezer, will be nestled into communities, sir. And this is a very important point to make, because from our perspective in the planning process, we won't have to invest heavily into infrastructure because these sites and services will be there already. Services will be there, sir, which will make it a lot more economical to deploy these projects. And sir, there's something about extending already existing communities. If you want to call it a new community, I say it's an extension because it embraces all of the attributes that these existing communities have already. And I know that this particular development will be in the constituency of St. Philip West. And I know that the Honourable Member for St. Philip West is looking forward to it. I know when she speaks, she will speak more about the existing community and what it will mean for people there, sir. So, sir, we don't just go about and identify land by chance. Neither do we simply acquire parcels because they just become available. Every acquisition forms part of a deliberate strategy that balances housing demand, existing infrastructure, environmental sustainability, community development, and responsible stewardship of public finances. This parcel at Ebenezer satisfies every one of those considerations, sir. Mr. Speaker, it's not just about good planning, it's good economics, sir. Every dollar that the government does not have to spend extending kilometers of new roads, every dollar that it does not have to invest in entirely new utility corridors, sir, this can be deployed into affordable housing, sir. So, sir, this administration has made a conscious decision that every housing development must contribute to a broader national vision, which is strengthening our communities, surrounding communities, and each acquisition must deliver long-term value to the people of this country. Sir, you've also heard the Honourable Prime Minister mention at the same vineyard launch that we will also be entering, the ministry will be entering into a derelict housing program. And with a similar purpose, that we will use derelict houses and vacant lands, which we all have in our constituencies, and deploy those sometimes eyesores into housing, sir. Why is this important? Not only does it erase a nuisance in our communities, but similarly with Deanstown Heights and with Ebenezer, with other housing developments that we will engage in, the sites and services are already there, sir. So the truth is that when we're in the process of developing this derelict housing program, and when we identify these abandoned and dilapidated properties which have fallen into disuse, we will then reintegrate these houses into what was vibrant neighborhoods, sir. And we will look at the legal framework. We will look at ways in which we can amend legislation to be able to achieve this objective. In some instances, we will partner with the families to also see how we can adaptively reuse these properties and deploy them back into the housing system, sir. This is sustainable development in practice, sir. Mr. Speaker, it would be remiss of me if I did not say respect is due to the Ebenezer Methodist Church, sir. While treating to the land itself, it's important to also acknowledge its custodians, sir, and the history of that land which is being transferred. We cannot forget it, sir. The parcel is owned by the Ebenezer Methodist Church. This is, in fact, very significant because for generations, the Methodist Church has been a cornerstone in the development of modern Barbados. Long before the emergence of any welfare state or many of our present public institutions, the church stood at the heart of community life. And Mr. Speaker, we just buried our national hero, and you know, I thought about the Methodist Church and its matriarch, which is also another national hero in the right excellent Sarah Ann Gill. And so the foundations of what Barbados stands for is not just physical structures, but is vested in our national heroes. And I thought it was very important to mention that fact, because the truth is that the culture of this community is ingrained in this project, sir, and we want to keep all of the earmarks of that culture intact, sir. And the Methodist Church, being that it was there for generations, is very important to that, sir. And we know that the Methodist missionaries established schools for enslaved and free black children wherever possible, and Sarah Ann Gill protected and sustained the movement that made those educational efforts possible, sir. So it's important to recognize that fact. This is not just about housing, sir. This is about people, and we must say that. Mr. Speaker, that legacy is important, but also important is that this is not an action against the church, nor a dismissal of its long-standing service to the community. Rather, it reflects a shared understanding that land and resources should ultimately serve the public good. And following the amalgamation of the school and the relocation of supported activity, and I'm sure that the Honourable Member will speak about that a bit, it does not trespass on any other activity that happens in that community, sir. So this will be a genuine benefit to that community. And sir, at this point in time, I would like to reflect more on the broader housing initiative, which Ebenezer is a solid part of. I mentioned Vineyard, which will have about 1,100 houses or so. We have Todd's in St. George, Coverley Great House, Sergeant's Village, Hanson, and then I think the Honourable Member for St. Philip West will benefit again with Searles, if I am correct. And we have Bright Hall in St. Lucie, we have Branchbury West, and then I'm really looking forward to Lower Burney. So, sir, I'm excited about the housing program. I'm excited about the prospects for our people. And I think individually, each project is important. Collectively, they demonstrate a national housing system being deliberately built, not improvised. And sir, it starts with land acquisition. We are 166. So as I said before, we have to be able to use our resources wisely, sir. And sir, part of the housing program is that at the ministry, we have to be able to use each individual entity wisely, whether it be Hope, NHC, or the ministry itself. Hope is designated as a delivery engine, the engine which will engage in the development and engage in joint ventures. NHC, we have resources which will look at planning, design. We have architects that we're hiring to be able to treat the designs. We've already designed a lot of the houses which will be deployed at Ebenezer and all the other developments that we've mentioned before. And NHC, we've been more of a facilitator, sir, such as what you've seen at Deanstone Heights, and you'll see at Ebenezer as well. And 40 acres is youth, right? I don't remember? Right, and at 40 acres, of course. I was leaving a little something for the Honourable Philip West to talk about as well. So the truth is that it's called comparative advantage. Each entity within the ministry, we allow them to do what they're best at. Bring them together so that we can have a successful housing program. And that's what it's about. And I want to thank the Honourable Prime Minister because this is her vision that we got to look at each of these entities and unleash the potential of each to be able to come together, sometimes in a tripartite arrangement, between, it could be joint venture, NHC, and Hope, coming together, and most certainly will deploy those efficiencies in each agency at Ebenezer so that we can be able to get that project going as well. Mr. Speaker, you heard the Prime Minister talk about the industrial approach to housing. This is something that we cannot wait on, sir. So right now we're looking at technologies, we're looking at lots of different ways in which we can not only have efficiency, but build houses faster. And the truth is, we will be deploying these technologies in these developments that we intend to engage in, including Ebenezer. Modern construction, the modern procurement process, and project delivery all are intertwined. So, sir, we cannot speak about housing without talking about the fact that we need to be insistent on the way we build, but inserting climate resilience into our houses. And it's obvious why. We saw what happened in Jamaica, and the truth is that we have a unique opportunity to be able to build houses which are more climate resilient. I know sometimes we all see it on Facebook or Instagram when you see these Chinese expandable houses. And don't get me wrong, they have a role to play in recovery. We know that in Jamaica, thousands of these have been deployed, and these are more used as transitional housing. And there is a definite role for them to play in disaster recovery. We just saw the earthquake that happened in Colombia. We saw the earthquake that happened in Venezuela. Housing is going to play a central role in these disasters, sir. And the truth is that we've been blessed. Some people say that God is a Bajan, that we have not had the big one. But what that does is it gives us the opportunity to be able to build smart and to insert climate resilience into our houses, sir. So that is definitely what we're looking at there in Ebenezer and other developments. And that is why this government has we've already been doing this in our Roofs to Reefs program. And this is part of our national housing strategy, and why developments like Ebenezer are being planned not just for today's needs, but for the environmental realities that we face in the next 30 to 50 years. And part of the environmental realities is, and we saw it with Kadooment Day, a lot of people remarked on how hot it was. And we know that sometimes we gotta look to the old ways to be able to look how we can get these the cooling effect through these houses. Some of the old ways are the better ways. We see how the old people had the high ceilings and the pitch roofs, and that allows for the cooling to happen in a natural way. So a lot of those old school designs, sir, we will also be inputting into our modern designs. So we won't be ignoring the decades of experience that we've had, sir, living in the tropics. So, sir, all these things, when we amalgamate them, we're looking at future-proofing our communities. Communities that are designed to withstand stronger storms, equipped to manage changing rainfall patterns, ready for renewable energy integration, and this is obviously very important given that we have certain targets that we have to make as a country, connected to modern digital infrastructure, supported by efficient water and utility systems, and integrated into existing villages for social and economic continuity, as I said earlier. So, Mr. Speaker, this is the standard to which we are now holding ourselves, not just houses that meet today's needs, but houses that will be safe, affordable, and functional decades from now, sir. And Mr. Speaker, in closing, 50 years from now, no one would necessarily remember that I came here and laid this resolution here in this honorable house. But they will remember the families, sir, who built their lives there. They'll remember the children who grew up there. They'll remember the community that emerged there. They will remember that Parliament had the foresight to act before the need became a crisis. So this resolution is far more than just about land. It's also about legacy, sir. In the same way, the legacy of our founding fathers, our national hero Sogari, Sarah Angill, who inspired generations through the pursuits of excellence in sports, and who fought for justice an opportunity for the impoverished, sir, the most vulnerable and the enslaved in this country. Mr. Speaker, as such, the housing program under this ministry is about land to legacy, sir. This exercise is not only just about constructing houses, it's about building intergenerational wealth for our citizens, sir. So with those few words, sir, I do beg that this resolution pass.
Honourable Member for St. Philip West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as you know, housing is more than just shelter. It is stability for a number of persons who've been renting and moving from pillar to post, from family and other areas over time. Having housing that is stable is important to them. Housing, sir, is dignity. It is dignity for a number of those persons who have not been able to have decent housing over a period of time. And you know, sir, that for some people who never thought that they would be able to own a home, housing is also a proud achievement. And this resolution, sir, which seeks to increase the housing and the ownership of homes in St. Philip, in particular in the area of Ebenezer, in the constituency of St. Philip West, which I have the privilege to represent as the Member of Parliament, I must say that I give my wholehearted support to this resolution, and I thank the Member of Parliament for St. Michael West. Home ownership, sir, particularly when people feel grounded and they're connected and they're engaged meaningfully where they live, it builds stronger communities, and stronger communities will build a stronger country. St. Philip is growing, sir. Mr. Speaker, St. Philip, if I look at the statistics we currently have available, it is the third most populated parish in Barbados, third behind only St. Michael and Christ Church. And that's according to the World Population Review. St. Philip represents, I am told by the statistics, about 12%, 11.6 specifically, of our national population. That means, sir, that for every 50 people you see walking down the road, 5 or 6 of them are from St. Philip. And in terms of the trend of growth in the parish of St. Philip, the statistics suggest that in the years leading up, the 10 years leading up to 2021, and even since, that parish, our parish of St. Philip, has grown about 5%, 4.8% in particular. And when we look at how this growth relates in the national scheme of things, we recognize that St. Philip is growing at a rate that is faster than many of the other parishes. What all of this means, in short, sir, is that St. Philip has a lot of people, and that the trend suggests that it is still growing and that it is doing so faster than many of the other parishes. What this means, sir, is that there is a very real need for housing, and that we need to find more housing not only for people who already live there, but also for newcomers who are moving into the parish of St. Philip. People must live somewhere, sir. And I would share, sir, that the second most frequent request I get in my constituency clinic is for housing. The need is very real. The need for housing will have to be filled not only by government, but the private sector, as well as private citizens. All have to play their part. And, sir, government has continued to invest in housing in St. Philip, along, of course, with the private sector and individual citizens. And from the government side, you heard the Honourable Member from St. Michael West speak of some of the developments. At Searles, that is again in St. Philip West, in St. Philip, approval has already been granted for a proposed 191 housing solutions that will consist of single houses, duplexes, and quadruplexes, as you heard him mention. At Vineyard, you heard him mention that the Prime Minister launched Vineyard very recently. It is intended that 1,100 housing solutions, I believe that is in St. Philip North, that too is already proposed. At Concordia Gardens, which is near to Dodds, that is now well on its way to completion with 86 housing solutions. Those are the Duravilla houses, the houses through the Guyanese Partnership. At River Crescent, we have completed, the Ministry of Housing has completed 62 housing solutions, and the minister has informed that people have already been allocated, and now it's time for them to move to the next stage beyond allocation. Ebenezer Community, sir, where this proposed project is intended to be, it is a mature community, sir. It is an aging community. I would say generally the largest segment of the adult population in this age, in this area, is between 45 and 54 years old. And if I looked at the last elections register, 1 in 3 voters were over 60. Community renewal and sustainability have to be the focus of how we develop our rural communities, including places like Ebenezer, where the population is maturing, it is aging, and we need to ensure that it remains vitalized. Communities die when we do not develop them, sir, not only in terms of physical infrastructure development, but in terms of people and the activities and the services that we provide for the local community to be able to thrive. The 30 housing solutions that are proposed for Ebenezer, which will, as you heard the Honourable Member for St. Michael West say, will include duplexes and quads. And I know some people ask, what is that? Really, we have a model where you have one piece of land and you have one house on it. In the situation of duplexes, you may have the same piece of land, but you may have 2 distinct and separate independent homes on that same piece of land, whether they're next to each other or whether they're stacked on top of each other. And quadruplexes simply is the similar idea, but instead of 2, you have 4. And that allows us then to better utilize the space that we have in that area. And I'm happy to hear from the Honourable Member for St. Michael West that duplexes and quads will be an important part of the feature, which will change the aesthetic of the neighborhood, because currently there are not such types of architectural structures in that area, and it brings a more modern aesthetic to the area. Sir, the proposed housing development at Ebenezer will present the opportunity for more quality homes, for more individuals and families to build a very revitalized community. The Ebenezer Methodist Church, sir, I cannot close without saying something about the Ebenezer Methodist Church, which continues to be a vibrant and active part of the Ebenezer and surrounding communities. That the land which has been acquired from the Ebenezer, from the Methodist Church, that church is over 185 years old, with buildings that would have been opened back in 1841. It is encouraging, therefore, sir, that we will be able to utilize land that has been acquired over that 185 years of its history to be able now to build the future within that community. Going forward, sir, all relevant government agencies, financial institutions, developers, stakeholders need to continue to work together collaboratively and transparently. High building standards, which are suited to the evolving climate, need to be a part of how we build this house, these houses. And in fact, I must say, sir, and this is something that my constituents have asked me to mention, accessibility to mortgages and financing. Because it is great to have the house, but if they believe that the house is out of reach because they can't qualify, because the financing models that are being used are not suited to their circumstance, sir, then it is still not accessible. Housing is still not accessible to them. And sir, you know that the kind of housing that you, sir, Mr. Speaker, might be able to afford, maybe a domestic worker might not also be able to afford. And therefore, we need to make sure that we have a range of housing options to ensure that all can be a part of this. As we provide housing, sir, the way in which this Barbados current government, and I believe governments going forward over time, must continue to provide housing in a way that there is a place for all, and for all a place on the landscape of Barbados. With these few words, I'm obliged.
Honourable Member Sir Michael Northwest.
Sir, I rise today, sir, in support of this resolution to mandatorily acquire approximately 2.21 acres of land at Ebenezer St. Philip for the public purpose of housing development. Sir, I do so because housing is not simply about constructing buildings. It is about restoring hope, creating opportunities, strengthening families, and ensuring that every Barbadian has the dignity of a place to call home. Housing is one of the greatest social investments any government can make. A secure home provides stability for children to learn, sir. Security for seniors to age with dignity, and an opportunity for hardworking families to build wealth through home ownership. For thousands of low-income and middle-income Barbadians, owning a home remains one of life's greatest dreams. This resolution, sir, is another step towards making that dream a reality. Sir, I wish to highlight 10 important points in relation to this document, sir. This resolution seeks the acquisition of 2.1 acres of land, specially for residential development. This demonstrates, sir, that the government is actively identifying suitable lands to address Barbados' housing shortage. 2, the Cabinet of Barbados approved the acquisition as early as February 2024, showing that this project forms part of a carefully planned national housing strategy rather than a rush decision. 3, the land is already located near an existing community with access to roads, water, electricity, and internet services. Developing housing where infrastructure already exists reduces construction costs and allows new residents to integrate into established communities more quickly. 4, this document explains that using existing communities reduces the need for expensive new infrastructure, while allowing residents to benefit from nearby shops, churches, and community facilities. Sir, this represents sound planning and responsible use of taxpayers' money. 5, this document states, sir, that this parcel of land was once used as a cricket field, but has become underutilized because of the school has amalgamated and sporting facilities have moved elsewhere. This means, sir, that the government is seeking to put on the used land into productive use for the benefit of the people. 6, this development has the potential, sir, to provide at least 22 single detached homes with the possibility, sir, of increasing the number through duplex development. Every additional home represents another family moving from uncertainty to stability. 7, sir, this project will be undertaken by the National Housing Corporation and Hope, Inc., with emphasis on resilient housing capable of benefiting from future renewable energy initiatives, sir. This means these homes are being designed with the future in mind. 8, this project forms part of the government's broader commitment to build 10,000 houses across Barbados. This is an ambitious national objective, sir, aimed at addressing the growing demand for affordable housing. 9, this proposal aligns with the physical development plan, sir, by expanding existing villages instead of having overgrown bush and unused agricultural lands. This creates a balance between development and environmental protection, sir. And 10, this document clearly states that the government remains committed to providing safe, affordable, sustainable housing, particularly for low-income and middle-income households, while expanding programs such as the social mortgage program to help more Barbadians achieve home ownership. Sir, while I support this resolution wholeheartedly, sir, I also believe it is our responsibility, sir, as legislators, to identify areas that deserve careful attention so that the implementation truly benefits the people we represent, sir. Please allow me, sir, to respectfully identify 5 concerns, particularly from the perspective of low-income Barbadians, sir. While the document speaks about increasing housing density through duplexes and apartment buildings, sir, it does not clearly indicate how affordability will be protected over time. Higher density should never result in prices that place these homes beyond the reach of ordinary working-class Barbadians, sir. 2, although the document references low-income and middle-income households, it does not specify how many of these units will be reserved for the lowest-income families or what eligibility criteria will be applied. Greater transparency, sir, will provide reassurance to those most in need. 3, while the Ebenezer Methodist Church will be compensated, sir, the document doesn't outline the wider community will continue to access recreational or community space that was once available on that property, sir. Community development, sir, should always accompany housing development. 4, the document does not provide projected timelines for construction and delivery. Families waiting for homes deserve a clear indication of when they may realistically expect these houses to become available. And my 5th point, sir, while renewable energy and resilient